Ashes of trust. They say love built on lies burns twice as bright, but only half as long. Daniel Harper didn't know the moment his world would collapse was already sealed in a smile, a glance, a late phone call. What he thought was home was the stage for a betrayal he never saw coming. But what they took from him, he would rebuild, stronger, deeper, truer. This is not just a story of betrayal. It's a story of survival. On the morning of their 20th wedding anniversary, Daniel Harper brought home roses. He had worked late the night before finishing a handcrafted walnut bookshelf for a client in Boston. Melissa had always loved the smell of freshly sanded wood, said it reminded her of the early days when Daniel was just starting his shop. The children were buzzing about their mother's surprise dinner. Sophie, 17, had made a cake. Jonah, 14, practiced a song on guitar. Grace, only 8, wrote a poem. But Melissa didn't come home. By midnight, Daniel's calls went unanswered. At 1:04 a.m., a single message arrived. "I'm sorry. I can't live like this anymore. I've left. Take care of the kids. Please don't try to find me." Daniel checked hospitals, called friends, even Melissa's estranged sister in Maine. No one knew anything, or said they didn't. The children were shattered. Daniel pretended it was temporary, that Melissa needed a break. Claire, Daniel's younger sister, came daily to help. But nothing filled the silence Melissa left. Jonah asked every night if they should drive around and look. Grace left her mother's favorite tea out on the counter. Sophie stopped painting. And Daniel? He stopped sleeping. 3 months later, truth arrived by accident. Jonah had gone with Claire to a hardware store in a nearby town. He came back, clutching a crumpled newspaper, his eyes wide. On the front page, Melissa, radiant in a wedding gown, standing next to Andrew Harper, Daniel's younger brother. They had married the previous weekend in New Hampshire. Daniel collapsed into a chair. The room spun. Not Melissa. Not Andrew. Not the two people he trusted most. Andrew had always been the golden one. The talker, the charmer, the drifter. He had burned bridges in 3 states. Daniel had loaned him money more times than he could count. Their father died believing Andrew would finally straighten out. And now, he'd taken Melissa. Daniel stared at the newspaper photo for hours. Then he burned it in the fireplace. The betrayal spread like wildfire. Neighbors whispered. Some friends stopped calling. Rumors filled in the gaps. Melissa had fallen in love with Andrew while Daniel was working late. There were trips, secret texts, nights away. Sophie became withdrawn. Jonah got into fights. Grace wouldn't speak. Daniel knew grief well. He had lost his mother young. But betrayal was different. It poisoned memory. Even the good days felt like lies. Claire encouraged him to talk to a therapist. Daniel refused at first. But one night, when Grace had a panic attack and curled up crying in the laundry room, something cracked. He started going weekly. At the same time, he reinvented his business. His videos on fine craftsmanship began gaining traction online. Orders from across the country poured in. He turned the old barn into a full workshop with filming space. Sophie returned to painting. She applied to the Rhode Island School of Design. Jonah built a small drone from scratch. Grace began writing short fantasy stories about missing queens and kings who built cities from ash. Daniel taught them how to cook, how to sand wood, how to find meaning in creation. Emma entered their lives quietly, nurse, widowed, gentle. Her son Jacob was Jonah's friend. One day, she stayed for tea, then dinner, then a walk, then something more. Melissa and Andrew's marriage began to rock quickly. He spent money like water. She discovered he was gambling again. The job he bragged about was fake. He was forging checks. Melissa began drinking. Soon, creditors came calling. Andrew got violent. Melissa filed for a restraining order. Days later, police arrived and arrested Andrew for fraud and theft. He had stolen over $200,000 from a nonprofit. The trial was public. Melissa was dragged through the press. She had known some of Andrew's dealings. She lost her job, her apartment, and most of her friends. She wrote Daniel a letter, apologizing, asking to see the children. He never responded. It was Claire who called him. She's back in town. Says she wants to see them. Daniel stood on the porch when Melissa approached. She looked nothing like the woman he had loved. Thin, older, broken. "Please," she said. "Just 5 minutes." "You don't get to walk in and out of their lives," he replied. "You chose this. They're my children." "They're not," he said. "Not anymore." He closed the door gently. Daniel and Emma married under the apple trees behind the house. Jonah played guitar. Sophie painted the arch. Grace read a poem titled Roots. They spent weekends at farmers' markets selling handcrafted pieces. Emma planted a herb garden. Daniel taught woodworking at the local school. The house was no longer haunted. Andrew served a full sentence. Upon release, he moved out of state. Melissa drifted between shelters. Occasionally, she sent birthday cards. Grace never opened hers. Sophie's artwork appeared in galleries. Jonah earned a tech scholarship. Grace published her first fantasy novel at 13. Daniel kept the first bookshelf he made for Melissa. But now it held only their children's stories, family photos, and Emma's plants. The porch faced east. Daniel stood there every morning, coffee in hand, Emma beside him, the wind moving softly through the apple trees. He had been broken, betrayed, left with nothing but questions. But he built again, not with anger, but with purpose. Not to prove something, but to protect something. And what he built, they could never take.